Hi, my name is Tyler Fornes, and I am the co-host of The Good, the Bad, and the Hunky here on the Voice of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Every week, my co-host Fred Moreland and I discuss all the happenings of All Elite Wrestling and everything going on in the universe of Tony Khan. We talk about Dynamite, we talk about Rampage, and we will talk about Collision when the time comes as well, along with all the appearances outside of AEW from all the best talents in All Elite Wrestling. This is one of the more cohesive wrestling companies in the entire world, and we discuss every intricacy about it, including the unique booking of Tony Khan that is both a huge positive and a major detriment. Check us out every single Thursday here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network.
Hello there, my name's Neil David and I'm the host of Eurograps Express, the podcast exclusively dedicated to the wrestling of Europe. If it's wrestling and it happens in Europe and it's good, we talk about it. Whether it's RevPro, Progress, WXW, Passion Pro, Pro Wrestling Chaos, Pro Wrestling North, we don't care, we talk about them all. If it's good and it's exciting, I want to share it with you. We're on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Check us out on the feed. Check us out on Twitter at EuroGrapsEXP. And join us for chat about European wrestling and a little bit of chat about cheese. Hopefully see you there.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Welcome to Eurograps Express. I'm your host Neil David and we are back once again to talk about all the exciting events on the British and European wrestling scene. I'm a week late again with an episode and I apologise after saying I wasn't going to be late again. But last weekend I ended up going to Belgium, to the Ardennes Forest, to the Spa Grand Prix to watch that, which is a bit of a life kind of experience that I've wanted to tick off for a long while, you know, go to a Grand Prix. I've been an F1 fan since I was a kid. I remember watching it on ITV with my dad when I was about 7 years old, and it stuck with me. And the opportunity came up to drive down. There was 5 lads in a small Range Rover stuff driving down to Belgium, watching cars go by at ridiculous speeds with the cheapest tickets. But it was great. It was a brilliant experience. There's a bit of a guilty pleasure by F1 obsession. I don't know. It just doesn't seem to. People always seem surprised when they hear that I really like motorsport, but I do. I love F1, MotoGP, British touring cars, the works. And I don't know. It's one of those things that people don't seem to think fits with me. But you know, there you go. It is what it is. We all have our surprises. I'm not just obsessed with cheese. Although I have to say, I've had last night. I was playing Warhammer with my cousin, and we made this sort of like an antipasti kind of board. And I had this cheese on it that I picked up, and it was smoked cheddar, but smoked with mustard seeds in it. And it was unbelievable. Just had it with buttermilk crackers, and just really simple, nothing else with it. I didn't end up putting like chutneys or anything on it, just this mustard creamy cheddar. It was like a sharp cheddar, but it had a creamy texture to it. It was absolutely lovely. Far too good for my cousin. He's a tosspot. Bit of news though since the last episode. We finally have a match announced for AEW All In that London. Now, I know people are starting to get a little bit panicky about this, and I do kind of get it. You know, we bought these tickets and we're excited, and we want to actually get excited. Do you know what I mean? As it feels like in previous issues, like, I'm not writing a fanzine. In previous episodes of the podcast, I've wanted to talk about the show. And actually, what have we really been able to talk about? We've been able to say there is a show. We've been able to talk about the attendance and the ticket sales, but not much else. But anyway, they finally announced something. It's going to be Adam Cole versus MJF for the big bell, assuming that that's going to be the main event. I would, you'd think, wouldn't you? And I'm actually quite happy with that. I'm seeing a few people who are grumbling, and I kind of get it from a certain perspective because I'm not an Adam Cole fan. I never have been. Back to ROH days, NXT, obviously not. I've never been a big Adam Cole guy. I think he's a bit... He's not quite a jag, but he's not far off, is he? He just feels like there's not much about him to get excited about in terms of his work, in terms of his charisma. He's fine. I enjoy shouting Adam Cole baby at 3:00 in the morning on a Wednesday as much as everybody, but he's not somebody who... Like, what's the best Adam Cole match? Like, nothing really springs to mind for me. And that, might be a fault. It might have been, with me, it might have been one sprung to mind straight away with you there. But for me, not very much. But this is the most AEW match imaginable, isn't it? Adam Cole versus MJF. MJF is AEW to the core. Adam Cole feels like he's very much part of AEW. And I know that sounds like such a stupid way of articulating it because everyone on the show is part of AEW. But short of having, something elite against FTR, which because of politics and what have you, probably isn't going to happen, this feels like a very, very AEW match to have. And I know we could say, I wanted this celebration of wrestling and we were saying, they should book this person from Brit Wrestling, they should book this and they should book that. Actually, they've sold a lot of seats based on having an AEW show. And that's a little bit of a weird realization that I had a few weeks after they went on sale. And it sounds like such a weird thing to say, doesn't it? That, hey, this AEW show is going to be, aimed at AEW fans. And what better match can you have for the AEW fans than that? And if you look at WrestleTix as well, they're obviously keeping track of the attendance and what have you. And it's picked up significantly since they announced that match. It's not like people are waiting. Like, for me, if I was waiting for a match announcement, that match wouldn't swing me either way, I don't think. It's not something that's going to get me particularly excited. But people who are on the fence about an AEW show and they are an AEW fan, it clearly has. They're currently up to 78,189, although that was the number a couple of days ago. They're selling like 400 or 500 tickets every couple of days. There's only 5,800 left. Strong movement, as WrestleTix says, and that puts it as well. Dave's announced officially this is now a bigger show than WrestleMania 3. Unless you go by the kayfabe number. Can you imagine? Is there anything more boring than that conversation? I just made me laugh when I was looking on Wikipedia and it's got the list of professional wrestling shows just to see where it sits. And it's just beaten WrestleMania 28, which was the Cena Rock, and it's coming up to WrestleMania 23. It looks like it's going to beat that, and it's just, you go up to WrestleMania 3 and it's got the 93,000 number and in brackets disputed. And I feel like that's one of those conversations. What was the attendance at WrestleMania 3? And I can completely recognise that it's important to know what the actual attendance was. It's like TV ratings. I don't talk about them very much. It doesn't really affect my analysis and my view of wrestling, but I recognise that it's important to know these things. I recognise that when we're talking about these big pantheon historic wrestling shows, it's important to know what kind of attendance they did. But to me now, it's like when you're in the office and you say you've got a cheese muffin and someone says, oh, you call it a muffin, I call it a bap. And then Sandra pops up and says, "You call it a bap, I call it a roll." And just my eyes glaze over and I just can't have that conversation anymore. "Oh, you call it a scone, I call it a scone." Not bothered. Honestly, I couldn't care less. It's like the default conversation, isn't it? And that's what the WrestleMania 3 attendance is. But I guess we could maybe switch that now and have it as the all-in attendance because it's beat it. Have you noticed Grado seems to be popping up a lot as well? And a lot of people are talking about, hey, imagine having Grado's entrance at Wembley and having everyone sing that Madonna song. Grado's rubbish. I never, ever understood Grado. I get that he's very charismatic, but his story is that he wasn't a very good wrestler, but he really loved wrestling, and he was there as like a fan. But then ICW made him the champion, and I get why, because he drew money and people loved him. But he kind of just belittled everything else, because wasn't the whole point of Grado that he wasn't a very good wrestler? I don't know. I never got Grado, but you know what I'm like with crowd sing-alongs. You know what I'm like with people being happy at a wrestling show. Can't be having it, can we? I tell you what else has happened since the last episode. Impact are touring the UK. They're doing 3 dates. They're doing Coventry, which is the nearest one to me. I can't remember where the other one is, but they've announced quite a bit of talent as well that's coming on these shows. It's Glasgow, Newcastle, Coventry. They're just 3 days, 26, 27, 28. They've announced as the touring roster, you've got Eddie Edwards, Deonna Purrazzo, Moose, Gail Kim, Grado, Joe Hendry. You've got Alex Shelley. We've got Brian Myers, Tommy Dreamer, Ace Austin, Chris Bay, Frankie. A proper Impact roster. And we were talking before about AEW and it being a proper AEW show. They brought a proper Impact roster over. And I'm actually very, very tempted to go. My only issue is I could get to that Coventry one. But you look at the price of tickets. I mean, it's on a Saturday, so I won't have to worry about work and stuff. And it's Coventry, which is about an hour or so away from me. But let's have a look at these ticket prices. Where's it gone now? Front row's $350 or $150. $350 if you get like signed bits, like if you go like do meet and greet, that sort of thing. And it's like $120. A reasonable ticket, a general admission ticket, is sold out. Oh, there you go. Shut up, Neil. Bloody hell. Yeah, general admission sold out. You can get silver tickets now. There's a couple of 80 quid tickets left, which is like row 4 and 5. There's row 2 left and front row left. But wow, they've sold. I mean, look, Impact always do well in the UK, don't they? We shouldn't really be surprised. I know it's a very different wrestling world these days, but wow, done really well. Another great announcement, Fantastica Mania from RevPro. And how great is that? They're doing a UK Fantastica Mania. They've announced the building that it's going to be in. And it's in Manchester, which is my neck of the woods, which I'm very, very excited about. Let me go back and find it. It's at the... It's a full-on Fantastica Mania thing. It's a joint show with CMLL. They're calling it Lucha Libre UK. It's in my neck of the woods. What's the name of the building? It's in a really weird place. They put it on the website. If you go to cmlluk.com, you can sign up for it and everything. But where's the... Oh my, what's it called? Let me go in the Discord. If you're not in the Discord, you should join it, because there's a Eurograps Express room. But I know where it is, I just want to get you the right name. The Love Factory. Now, if you think of Manchester City Centre, there's a bit just outside of Manchester City Centre where Strangeways Prison is. Cheetah Mill. And then there's sort of a canal that runs between that area and town. And it's kind of down there. If you've driven past it, you'll remember it because there's a paint factory, which I recently learned does Warhammer paints. They do the Citadel paints. But it's got a big boat stuck in the ground. And if you're from round here, you'll know that really well. Because every time you drove past it as a kid, your dad was legally obligated to point out that if the paint factory ever blows up, it would take everything with it in a 2.5 mile radius, which would have been our house in Moston when we were kids. There's something about dads that they're... It's like, you know, when they pass like a good bridge and they're legally obligated to point out that it's a fantastic piece of engineering. It's like that sort of thing. So it's in a bit of a funny place. Like someone asked me on the Discord, is it who's Bilko? Sorry, someone. It was Bilko. Who's is it within walking distance of Manchester? And it kind of is if you're staying on that kind of Green Quarter, Northern Quarter side. If you like your beer, there's a fantastic pub called the Marble Arch. And I think you could walk to it from there. It'd be about a 10-minute walk from there. So if you want to go boozing, you could get in at Piccadilly, work your way up to sort of the Marble Arch, and then you're not that far away. But nothing's been announced for it in terms of matches, but Fantastica Mania UK. Just cool, isn't it? You know, and it feels like we're going through these shows. And how great is it that we've got... I mean, this not even including the CopperBox. We're going to have a genuine AEW show. We've got Impact on tour in the UK. And we've got Fantastica Mania all within a couple of weeks of each other. Just feels like a bit of excitement, doesn't it? It feels like he's a bit busy, you know. And it's nice to be busy. There's another announcement. I don't know if I quite put this in the pantheon of the others, but TNT are doing their joint weekend with GCW again. It's going to be when is it? It's going to be again a similar sort of time. I think it was about Octoberish last year, wasn't it? Oh, it's done that annoying thing. Yeah, it's early September. It's done that annoying thing on the website, you know, where it like jumps around and you go everywhere. But they're selling weekender tickets. They're £75. You can go higher if you want to be a VIP weekender, but £75 for 3 shows. It's not, you know, it's not rubbish, is it? Because they're doing 15th, 16th, and 17th. They've not announced too much yet, but last year it was basically a TNT show, a GCW show, and then a joint show. And I'm assuming they're going to do something similar. They've announced a bit of talent, so there's no matches, but they've announced Jordan Oliver, Ali Catch, Masa Slamovich, Blake Christian, Effie. You know, so it's the same sort of thing as last time. Starboy Charlie. And I enjoy it last year? I don't know. I'd have to go back and listen. I thought it was all right. And I think if you like GCW, then you would like it because it's just, again, an authentic kind of GCW style show. Not necessarily for me. It was better than I thought, though. There's this weird thing about GCW. Someone else said this. I can't remember if it was in the office Slack or the Discord, or I've just heard it somewhere. But GCW book everyone, and they book really good people, and a lot of people on it can wrestle really well, but they don't actually book themselves properly and push themselves to wrestle well, so you don't get good matches. So even if they did announce someone really exciting for these shows, it's still kind of hard to get excited about it because it's GCW, isn't it? Anyway, we should probably talk about some wrestling, shouldn't we? So what we're going to do this show, we're going to obviously review the Live at London. I've just watched it. It was on live. It's late Sunday night. And we're going to talk about that. We're also obviously going to talk about our favourite promotion, Purpose Wrestling. They had a show that's just gone up on the Patreon. The show was a few weeks ago, but it's just gone up on the Patreon to watch. And we're going to do a full preview, I think, of the CopperBox, because I think pretty much all the matches have been announced. We might get a couple of bits and pieces, but we'll check in with Rob Reed and see where we're up to with attendance. And we'll break those matches down and get excited about them, because we're on the road now to Wembley, aren't we? We're on the road to that London. All right, so let's go down south and talk about RevPro. All right, so we're coming off an epic encounter at York Hall. A little bit of a mixed bag, that show. It was generally an easy show to watch, but there was a few story things, a few booking decisions that I'm not quite sure I was au fait with. So it's always interesting going into these live at London's right after a York Hall show, because we're really going to see now, aren't we, what the impact of those decisions were. And really, they're in a very, very tricky position because we're building up to a CopperBox. You know, not a CopperBox, the CopperBox. And it's a tricky one for RevPro because it doesn't feel like wheels are spinning like you would expect building up to a big show. They're not really pushing it in a way that I would have thought. They're not building up to it in terms of storyline like I would have thought. I assume because they piggybacked off the back of AEW so quickly, and it's sort of, maybe they have things already planned, you know. I don't know what the lead out is. But anyway, let's talk about the show, because actually, generally, like always with the live at London's, it was a pretty good show. It was a very easy watch. It was 3 hours, but it didn't feel like 3 hours. You know, it was, everything on it was good, and everything had a good clip to it. And it sounds like when I say that about RevPro, I'm always damning it with faint praise by saying things like that, but I'm really not. Like, these shows are just good, solid shows. I think RevPro's hit rate in terms of just being entertained is higher than pretty much any promotion in the world. Like, they don't hit the same highs as an AEW would, for example, but they never hit the lows that they do. You know, some of those Dynamites recently have just been dirges, haven't they? Whereas you're not going to get that with RevPro. You know, you're always going to have a certain standard, and I think that says a lot. You know, that is a genuine compliment, I think, that shouldn't be ignored. Harrison Bennett against Leon Slater was the first one. I really like Harrison Bennett, you know, and it's one of those where I first saw him working the Welsh promotions and he was doing Chaos and what have you, and I thought he was all right. He was one of those wrestlers that you watch and go, yeah, he's good, but he wasn't someone that you thought, oh yeah, he's got potential. You know, because that happens a lot, doesn't it, on the British scene? You'll see a wrestler and they might not be great straight away, but you've got that little thing about him. But with him, I didn't really see it. But there's just something about his work in RevPro recently that's just really got me. And just the way he carries himself here. His entrance was just so cocky and self-assured. And he's got something about him that is inherently unlikable as a heel, in a good way as a heel. And yeah, he just really, really impressed me. But nothing can compare at the minute to how Leon Slater feels. You know, he's coming out to huge babyface reactions. It feels like he's right on the precipice of blowing up. And I know he's coming off the York Hall match, which I thought, you know, I said to you, Dinner, the Dan Maloney match I thought was absolutely fantastic. It's going to be really high up for me. The Dan Maloney match, the Will Ospreay match. It's going to be really high up when you're thinking of the best British matches of the year. It feels like there's just something exciting and a buzz about him that's just, you can't replace that, can you? The idea of somebody coming up for the first time and about to do something exciting. And that's why it's really important that he gets it right as well, because it's the old toothpaste in the tube analogy, isn't it? You know, once it's done, it's done. And it feels like he's on the precipice of doing something amazing. So, you know, we'll talk about the CopperBox later on. Great cockiness from him in this. Now, there was a spot in this that he was a really good match. You know, he's kind of like you'd expect. It's 15 minutes, action packed, really good. But there was a bit in this that stayed with me where Harrison Bennett jumped to the outside and was cockily looking at the camera, and he was kind of being filmed from below, like up, and you could just see Leon Slater running towards him. He dives feet first between the top of the middle rope and boots Harrison Bennett right in the back of the head. And the visual of that shot looked amazing. Such a great spot. It looked like it absolutely killed. Unbelievable stuff. It looks so good. The hang time on Leon Slater's work. You know, this is why it was really nice to have this match, because you kind of know it's an opener. It's against Harrison Bennett, who's further down in the card than Leon is, and you know Leon's going to win. But it just let you kind of enjoy his work and really appreciate things like the hang time on his drop kicks. Just unbelievable. I would say this was really good for Harrison Bennett, actually, because it established him and his style quite a bit. He was very brutal in his style with this one, very hard-hitting. Like, Leon Slater would be flipping around, and then Harrison Bennett would do that great thing where he'd punctuate with a great clothesline or something. Like he'd bring things to a close and like little runs and things with a bit of power. Kind of like Connor Mills does when he's against a faster wrestler. I really liked that. Thought that was really good. The only thing with Harrison Bennett is, and I know, again, this isn't a significant match, but I think it's just something to be aware of, is that he's kind of doing that heel sadistic cackle. When he really hurts someone, he do the kind of laugh and look, man. And I don't like that character in anyone. It's a weird way to behave, like your Seth Rollins or something. Just a really bizarre way to act. So I think he just needs to be really careful with that kind of thing, because it feels like if you were a wrestler, it would be really easy for you to go down that road, and I don't think it fits anybody, and it didn't really fit him either as well. Slater got really aggressive at the end of this. Really aggressive, and I like that. Like his Blue Thunder Bomb had a real slam to it that I thought was excellent. I've written in my notes for this match, and I don't know why. I've written, do we trust them? That's weirdly ominous, that, isn't it? I've completely forgotten why I've written that down. Do we trust them? Don't know. Who am I doubting? Don't know. Feel like everyone in my life, I trust them, so I don't know what's going on there. Next up, we had Greedy Souls against a returning Velocities. Now, here's a bit of a controversial opinion about the Velocities. I don't think they've done their best work in the UK. And I've always enjoyed the matches, and when they come over for Great British Tag League and they have the couple of matches against Aussie Open, I never thought they were all that. And it was a weird one, because when they came over and had these matches, and because obviously when they did it in Australia, it was 5 stars from loads of people. Everybody loved these matches they were having. And that was kind of the standard that you were judging them by. So I feel bad that I'm judging them by this ridiculous standard of essentially saying, have some of the greatest matches of all time, otherwise, I'm going to be disappointed. But I do just generally feel a little bit disappointed by the Velocities when they come over here. But I think what was great about this match is the pairing, I suppose. As Andy likes to remind us, it's styles that make matches, and you've got Greedy Souls, a big bruising heel team, against the speedy, fast baby faces, and that's just an absolute classic combination, isn't it? And I think a real great opportunity to have a very, very angry Greedy Souls. They come off a loss, they've just lost the tag straps, have a little bit of fire about them, want to get back in the game. And I think that's really cool. I think the problem with this match is, and it was fine. It was very traditionally structured, which is, as you do. The babyface had rung rings around the heavier weight kind of heels, and they have the big hope spots and the hot tags and stuff, which is great. I'm a big advocate for just classic structures of things like this. The problem was it was just quite sloppy in parts. It was like they weren't quite on the same page. And I'm starting to see this a little bit with Greedy Souls, is that when they're against faster tag teams, it just seems to fall apart a little bit. They never seem to be able to do things quite up to the speed of their opponents, if that makes sense. I know I'm explaining that in a very clumsy way. But yeah, there was just lots of clumsy little spots in this. That being said, there's just lots of satisfying things, like Paris De Silva would be running rings around Brendan White, and then Brendan would just smash him with a power slam or something. Just like we were saying before about the Harrison Bennett, Leon Slater thing. It's a classic way of structuring things that just really works. ending was great, big powerbomb on an apron and all this, and they sort of told the story in the end that the Velocities just snuck it. And I assume they're here for Great British Tag League as well. I mean, that's soon, isn't it? Is that actually booked in yet? I know it's usually around now. I mean, God forbid, they're not going to have announced cards, are they? I'm looking for, RevPro to see if they've announced cards. I don't think they've announced everything for the 11th anniversary show yet. So, the idea that we're going to get a card announced for that, but, who knows? But yeah, this match was pretty good, like I say, pile driver on an apron's just emotive, isn't it? It's always going to be something to get into. Next up, we had Dan Maloney against Zack Knight. And I'm not going to do the Zack Knight court thing this way. I know it says, as I said, didn't I? It seems like every time we talk about Zack Knight, we've kind of got to take him to RevPro court and decide whether or not he's good or whether or not he should be there and all that business. I don't want to do that with this because actually I think this spot in the card is really good for him. First of all, he came out looking like $1,000,000. He looked great. Like he had proper definition in his arms. He looked like he'd be, the kind of muscles you get from actually doing stuff. Not like a bodybuilder gets muscles to, the sake of building muscles. He's got it through grafting and fighting on the streets, which is excellent. Or, blade drives or whatever real men do, plumbing, pull-ups on bars in parks and I don't know. But yeah, this match was a proper fight. Dan Maloney's just brilliant at that, isn't he? And I think Dan Maloney fits this new Bullet Club so well. I think the Bullet Club are the most exciting they've been, and what I like about Dan Maloney being in the Bullet Club is if you think of that middle generation of Bullet Club, it felt like there were guys that joined the Bullet Club, suddenly went out and sort of changed who they were, got 1 million t-shirts printed. They kind of got the impression. There are some, I'm not going to name any names because I know you're going to be thinking of one, but that thing in football of the full kit wanker, like a grown man who wears a full kit. He wears the shirt, the shorts, and the socks. Some wrestlers join the Bullet Club and have the full kit wanker vibe to them, whereas Dan Maloney doesn't do that. Dan Maloney's just the same fighting bruiser that he always has been, and he's let the Bullet Club come to him, and it works really well. This match was an absolute scrap. Everything looked like it hurt, just the punches and the chops, and like I say, Zack looked the best he's ever looked. I think this is probably really up there for me in terms of Zack Knight matches. I thought he was great. Just big bruisers chopping each other, and I think that's absolutely satisfying. Bit of a weird ending to this one, and I don't know if it was intentional. And actually, I don't think it I don't know. For me, whether something's intentional or a botch doesn't always matter if it works. But with this one, it was basically a gore. So he didn't win using the Driller Killer. He won using the gore. And it looked like Zack Knight was supposed to kick out to me. But he didn't quite kick out, or the referee counted a bit quick. And, the referee sort of raised his hands to do 2, but the bell had already gone and then changed it to a 3, I think. They might have just been telling the story that Dan Maloney snuck it, just to keep Zack Knight alive. But I don't know, it felt like a bit of a mistake to me. But that's something you can go back to, isn't it? Zack Knight can feel robbed, and even if it's not a case of having a match with Dan Maloney, because, Dan Maloney's got other things on, you can have that feeling of him being robbed brought to other matches, and that could work really well. Really weird promo at the end. Maloney got the mic, and it was, the theme of it was very much like, everybody wants to know why I did what I did to Leon Slater, and using those kind of WWE cadences and WWE beats. And I just thought that didn't really work for me until Leon Slater came out and was Leon Slater, because the actual idea of the promo was great. The point was that Dan Maloney was saying that nobody knew who you were, Leon, until I came along, and I got, you were getting too big for your boots, you thought you were my equal, but you're not. You remember who put you where you were, sort of thing. You were nothing till I came along. And then Leon Slater comes out and essentially says it's the other way around. You were on your way out, Sunshine. You were this, didn't know what to do after WWE. You were all over the shop. You were sniffing at Will Ospreay's skirt. And it was teaming up with me and being around me that made you relevant and exciting, because I'm this big hot prospect that everybody wants to be around. So a great idea for me, building to the match at CopperBox. Just a fantastic, natural little story. Just the problem was there was just a few too many WWE beats in there, for want of a better expression, that just didn't serve the story or didn't really make any sense to me. But yeah. Still, great match, I thought. Really good match. Next up, we had, as he says, going to the wrong page. Next up, we had Sunshine Machine against Subculture. Ooh, Sunshine Machine. Feels like an unpopular opinion, really, that no one else seems to share, but I'm kind of sick of them. I don't know what it is, because everything they do is really good, and they have really good matches. And I think if you've not seen a Sunshine Machine match and you were to just watch this, you would really enjoy it. But I feel like I see the same match a lot with Sunshine Machine. And I don't know if it's just a feeling. I don't know if that's fair particularly. You might want to... you could probably think of examples to sort of disagree with that, dispute it. It just feels a bit weird. What I thought was interesting about this as well is that Gadge, the stopwatch guy on Twitter, he posts results and things like that, and he was live tweeting it, and he said Undisputed British Tag Team Championship match, and TK Cooper has quote tweeted him and said, then we quietly got told it wasn't a title match, then we didn't get an introduction, nice to be back, with a sad face. So whether he's frustrated with his spot at RevPro or not, or whether this is some kind of... that doesn't feel like a work, does it? It'd be a weird work, that. Because you're arguing about Andy Quilden, who's, he's not... And that kind of work shoot thing, I don't... They do it, but kind of very kayfabe, don't they, RevPro? So that just is a bit of a weird tweet. The match was fine, the match was really exciting. Mandrews is obviously a great wrestler, and they won me round at the end. They just, with the sheer speed and athleticism of everything that I'm seeing, I just don't know what it is. Subculture are just kind of hard to get excited about, and Sunshine Machine are the same. I wish I could articulate it, mainly because it's my job as a podcaster and wrestling critic to articulate why I feel like I do. But it feels just a bit strange when I watch them. I don't know what it is. You could say Sunshine Machine against somebody, Velocities, for example, and I go, okay. And then I'd watch the match and really enjoy it. And, give it 4 stars. But just the prospect of it just doesn't really do much for me. Subculture won. Sunshine. Too many S's here. Subculture won, and Velocities came out and challenged, which will be a great match, I'm sure. But just this match itself, I was just a little bit not in love with, I suppose. Okay, next up we've got Alex Windsor against Hyan. Tell you what, there was someone in the crowd for this. Flipping heck, screaming over the entrance, the introduction. I'd hate to be sat next to whoever that was, because they were flipping loud. Pay your money, chant what you want, I guess. It was Alex Windsor against Hyan. I can beat around the bush here, or I could just come out and say it. Heel Alex Windsor sucks. I really don't like this heel Alex Windsor. And it's not even that heel Alex Windsor sucks. That's what it is. It's this heel Alex Windsor. She comes out and she's smirking at the crowd. She's a baddie now, and I don't care about the audience. Do you know what I was saying about the Dan Maloney and the WWE beats? This is the same. This is how WWE do heels. I've turned my back on the RevPro universe kind of vibe to it. And Alex Windsor's better than this. Alex Windsor is a top-class worker, and she could do a better heel than this, I'm convinced. I just, the idea of turning her back on people at York Hall and suddenly smashing people with chairs, it's too corny for me, that. I just don't think that works at all. I have to say, though, out of this match, that Hyan was fantastic. I think Hyan's having a great run. I've never really been a fan of Hyan. I thought she was fine. Like, do you remember when she was in the mix with people like Giselle Shaw and Zoe Lucas? And she was always, and even with this feud, with like Danny Luna and Sky Smithson, she always felt like the third wheel, the least interesting part of that. But actually, with this little run, she's been really good. And she was really aggressive here. The match was really good, came out of nowhere. Still a little bit clunky at times, but, the story got over and she came out and just fought, and everything had a little bit of violence to it. And, really, really good. And then the ending came. And as we said, Alex Windsor is now playing this heel. So what she had to do at the end is do this weird ref distraction of kind of get the apron, fold it over, and then while the referee was distracted sorting the apron out, grab a belt and smash Hyan with it and win. Now, not only is that a bad ending anyway, it's just a boring ending to a match. Alex Windsor doesn't need to do that. She's been established as a fighting champion who only lost the belt through injury. She's already established herself as a world-class wrestler in the RevPro world, in this sort of kayfabe arena, if you like. She doesn't need to resort to that kind of thing. And the fact it's a belt spot, which we hate. And then you've also got the fact that the referee just looked like an absolute idiot. It was such a stupid thing to be distracted by and to miss the belt shot that it doesn't make Alex Windsor look clever. It doesn't make her look like she's outsmarted someone. It makes her look like she's outsmarted a baboon. I just do not like what they're doing with Alex Windsor at all. And the promo she delivered at the end of this, rambling on and on and on. I don't get what she was doing in the promo. Just seemed to ramble for ages and ages and ages. And it's such a shame because she was a great seller in this. The work was so good for so much of it. I just really didn't understand what they were doing here. I really don't. I don't understand why this is better than Alex Windsor just wrestling in a bit more of a bullyish, cockyish way. You don't have to do that. It's just bizarre, isn't it? That every now and then RevPro just tell brilliant stories for the most part and then just drop the ball like this. The question I always have for Andy, and I've mentioned this on the show before, is you've got to think, why is this better than just doing the obvious? It's like he doesn't want to do the obvious story, but then does something that's just worse. I don't understand. I really don't understand at all. Main event time. It was a 10-man tag elimination match. I like this idea. I think the problem with Live at London is that they often just do a load of singles matches, maybe a tag match or two in there, and they don't really do things like this, but they want to sort of treat it a bit more Corrigan Hall-y and do these 10-man tag eliminations. I'm into that. Not every time, but just to mix things up a little bit. I think it's a pretty decent idea. It was Callum Newman, Wild Boar, Jordan Breaks and Connor Mills, and Trent Seven against Robbie X, Michael Oku, Shah Samuels, Luke Jacobs and RKJ. So you've essentially got heels against baby faces, but then having Jordan Breaks on the heel team, which is a little bit weird. A little bit of a strange way of doing things. But essentially here you've got the male stars of RevPro, haven't you? You've got 10 blokes You know, I know you've got Leon Slater and Dan Maloney further down the card and what have you, and you've not got Will Ospreay there. But you've got, I mean, what a roster. Like, do some random matches with that. You know, Oku against Jordan Breaks, or Luke Jacobs against Wild Boar. You know, names that aren't even connected at all, and you could think of great programs to do. You know, just the depth of the roster is fantastic. It's kind of cool, like an old school Survivor Series thing, isn't it? This match, I don't know what it is. It's really weird, but really cool. You know, it started off really exciting with all the baby faces doing a big dive, and you know, Shah did his big moonsault out to the outside, and lots of great little bits of chemistry here that we've had established as well. You know, I'm talking about the new matches there, but you've got Mills and Connor X, Mills and Robbie X having a little bit of a to-do that was great, and then you'd have Newman against Robbie X. In fact, Robbie X against anyone. That was the thing that I took away from this, is that Robbie X spent a lot of time in the ring, and he was pretty much the best one throughout. There was a Luke Jacobs Wild Boar thing that was just really exciting and powerful, and I liked it. There was a brilliant bit. And it's kind of like, I didn't even think of the Mills-Oku thing. But there was a bit where Mills and Oku just kind of looked at each other for a bit. And then on the apron, and Mills punched every member of Oku's team and knocked him off the apron apart from Oku. And they just kind of looked at each other. And it was just a little moment. There was no big thing between Mills and Oku in this match. It was just a little moment that recognises that, okay, we're not telling this story right now, but this story hasn't gone away. It wasn't resolved. And I like that. You know, they've got something you can go back to. Because obviously Oku's champion at the minute, isn't he? Trent Seven wrestled in the Enfield style, i.e. not doing anything for most of this match. Which I thought was preferable, to be honest with you, because I don't think he's very good. He's still coming out with the belt, you know, he's robbed the belt and he's kept it. That story's kind of a bit trash, I think. I don't really get it. But what stood out to me quite starkly on this, and something that we've kind of been moving towards for a while, is RKJ. RKJ feels as cold as ice. And I think it's RevPro's fault. I understand there was the injury that had him vacate the title. Well, his brother lost it. His uncle lost it for him. Whatever. He had to lose the title. But I don't think that's why he feels ice cold. He felt red hot building up to that match with Ospreay. He beat Ospreay and it felt like a big moment. And then they just put him in weird tags. They had him do comedy stuff with Curtis Chapman, and then he got injured. And they brought him back, and they're not putting him. Like, say, why is he not in the Dan Maloney kind of position? Where he's having exciting singles matches. You know, they bogged him down in the Zack Knight matches, which were always going to have a ceiling. That's what it is with Zack Knight. He doesn't have to go to Wrestle Court anymore, because we know he's good. He's just good with a ceiling. I don't know why they weren't just having work rate matches with Zack Knight. Those main event work rate style matches. And the crowd just didn't react to him here. And when he came in and started beating people up, it just didn't feel exciting. Jordan Breaks felt more exciting. You know, Jordan Breaks was eliminated fairly quickly, but he had a good bit in the middle where he was just tying people up in knots and doing, you know, his throwback World of Sport style wrestling, catch as catch can stuff. And he felt more exciting than RKJ. And there was a time when we were saying that RKJ was going to be one of the biggest stars of all time in Britain. You know, I remember writing in reviews and saying about RKJ that RevPro need to make the most of him now because he's going to end up in AEW or New Japan. And now with sort of 2023 eyes and looking at the way he's perceived here, like, that just sounds ridiculous to me. It felt like he was moving in that direction, then it's just fallen off a cliff, fallen off a precipice. Which is a shame, really, because, you know, think back to those Robbie X matches he was having, and just great matches. Different matches, violent feeling matches. Felt like he was a wrestler on another level, and now he just feels I forget about him. Really, really weird. And he eliminated Jordan Breaks as well, and like I say, I think Breaks came out better. I tell you something that did really, really work me a little bit here, is when people are making these little jibes at Trent Seven. You know, they'll say like, "Oh, you're not in the WWE now, bitch," and stuff. And Michael Oku did the not the way. What did he say in his promo against Trent Seven? Oh, what was the phrase? Hang your head in shame. That was it. And they're having these little digs at him, and I know that it's a work. And I know that they're probably Trent Seven's idea, aren't they? He's probably saying, "Hey, use this." You know, he's an old school worker. But I can't help but pot for it. I just think it was really, really funny. Oku eliminated RKJ accidentally, which I didn't really like. Jacobs battered Trent Seven, which was great. And as much as I can criticise Trent Seven, his selling is just something else. Yeah, and then, Seven wins in the end, and Levi Muir comes out and attacks people, and now he's teaming with Trent Seven, and it's kind of hard to get excited about that match at the CopperBox, really. But overall, a decent enough show. Like I say, an easy watch. I like the fact they're doing these 10-man tags a little bit different. But the Maloney-Zack Knight match was really good. The women's match was great until the end. Tag match was good. Lots of interesting stuff there. Classic Live at London. Things are moving forward slightly, but they're moving forward to the CopperBox. So let's do a preview of the CopperBox. Okay, so the CopperBox. As I say, Rob Reed, Wrestling 101, former British Roundtable host, is keeping up with the numbers. You can follow him on Twitter at the R Double. And on other apps as well, I'm assuming. I'm a bit on the fence about these other apps. I don't know whether to, because obviously Twitter or X, and I'm also not going to go into that rubbish, but it's kind of dying a little bit. I don't know if I'm just going to call it a day with social media. Like I'm getting the Blue Sky and the Threads and things, and I know one of them's going to end up becoming dominant, and I should sort of but I'm thinking maybe this should just be the end of social media for me, because nothing good ever comes of them. But yeah, he's at the R Double on Twitter. They've passed the 2,500 ticket mark. So now it's officially their most attended show. They've made more than £150,000 on the door. So in terms of numbers, they've sold 2,608. And again, these are estimates, but they're going to be pretty accurate. He's literally counted the seats, so he's this is the best we're going to get, but I think we could take them fairly solidly. That does mean there's 4,300 seats remaining. So again, we're still in that little bit of a pickle where it's depending on how they set the building up, it might feel empty, because I'm on the upper bowl. I'd have thought they'd have just sold the lower bowl and not the upper bowl, but unless they're going to move me down. Like, I remember when I used to work at a theatre when I was a student, if shows didn't sell very well, I've got a story about this. If shows didn't sell very well, they'd close the gallery, and distribute the tickets into the circle and the stalls. My little story about that is I used to work at the Opera House in Manchester when I was a student. So this was around 2006, something like that. And do you remember around then, Take That came back and Boyzone came back, and there was this kind of nostalgia. These mid-20s. Late 20s girls were going and seeing the boy bands and stuff they used to love when they were kids, and it became a bit of the nostalgia thing kind of became a bit of a business. And E17 got on board with that. The famous E17 of the big coats at Christmas fame. and they booked the Opera House where I was working, and I was the doorman at the time. And the doorman, not like a bouncer, like if you know me in real life, you'd know that's ridiculous. I'd just open the doors and I'd lead people around and I'd put the fire alarms on, that sort of thing. And E17 were there and they'd not done very well. So what we ended up doing was closing the gallery in the circle and having everyone in the stalls. So what that meant is when E17 wanted a private bar to drink in, they went in the circle bar, which is at the back of the circle. And it was my job to go and get them and lead them down the stairs, because there's kind of these stairs running down either side of the stage, and then there's a door to get backstage that's on a code. So it was my job to go and get E17 from this bar. So I went and got E17, and to get to this door, you had to pass down the side of the auditorium. So all the girls started cheering and screaming and going, oh, E17, and, oh, Tony, how are you, and all that business. And they're cheering. And when we got through the door, I turned to E17 and said, not had a reception like that for a while. Meaning me, like as a joke. Like the idea is I never had a reception like that. I've never had a 500 women scream at me in desire. Like that's, I've rarely had one woman scream at me in desire. So the idea of that many is that was the joke I was making. But E17 thought I was taking the mick out of them, saying, oh, you've not had a reception like that for a while, basically making out that they were down and out. So E17 hit the roof, as a collective. There was 4 of them, I think. Brian, one of them wasn't there, and 2 others, I can't remember. They were going mental, and like the manager was complaining to my manager, and I got drawn into the office, and I had to retell this story. I nearly got sacked for not taking the mick out of E17. Anyway, so yeah, we're going to preview the show, aren't we? So that's my E17 story. So tickets wise, mixed bag, as we've said before. It's doing well in theory, but in practice, I don't know. What's it going to be like when we get there? But they've announced, I think, pretty much everything for the show. So we've got JJ Gale against Kosei Fujita. JJ Gale, I think, is great. And I like the fact they've got this opening match. Whether he could do something great with Fujita, I don't know. I'm not obsessive New Japan anymore. So at the minute with the G1, I'm watching the matches that are recommended to me. So I'm watching like the ELP Ospreay match, that sort of thing. But I've never really seen anything about Kosei Fujita that's got me excited. So I don't know. We'll have to see on that one. We've got Dan Maloney against Leon Slater, and I think that's going to be fantastic. Because with this story that they're telling of this very real friction between them, Dan Maloney being brutal, we know Leon Slater just absolutely gives everything. And you're telling me he's going to come out at RevPro's biggest ever show and not absolutely kill himself. Same with Dan Maloney as well, to be fair. That leap he does over the turnbuckle and in front of tons of people is going to be fantastic. And Dan Maloney's going to want to put Leon Slater over as well. It's just going to, I think that's probably the match I might be the most excited about after the obvious one. Obviously Tagaki against Ospreay is the one, isn't it? But as a RevPro guy, that's not a RevPro match, Tagaki against Ospreay. But as a RevPro guy, Maloney versus Slater is one that I'm really excited for. Next up, get this one. El Phantasmo and Shibata against Finlay and Gabe Kidd. So Gabe Kidd has got Shibata. He's got him in a tag match. I'm going to see Shibata wrestle. And this is such a weird one for me because, again, you don't want to piss in people's cornflakes. And if I'm excited for it, and I know people are excited for it, there's just something about Shibata that I was talking to the office Slack about this, and the best way I could describe it is If you tell me I'm going to watch a Shibata match in 2023 on tape, I don't really get excited for it. And obviously, that's not a reflection of the amazing work. He's one of my all-time favourite wrestlers. You know, talking to Rob Reed before, he was doing the Wrestling 101, and I wrote about Okada Shibata for that because it's my favourite match ever. Ever. But if you tell me I'm going to watch a tape match from 2023, I'm not excited. If you tell me I'm going to see him live, though, that changes things. You know, I'm going to see... And obviously with the history he's got with RevPro and all that, I think it's great. I think El Phantasmo's firing on all cylinders. Finley's the best he's ever been. You know, he's not my favourite wrestler in the world, but, you know, I'm excited to see him. And Game Kid's Game Kid. You know, I think that's going to be a really interesting match to see. We've got Tomohiro Ishii against Luke Jacobs. That's a match, right? I know, again, Ishii's not quite what he was, but Jacobs, that's, you know, those two. That's what Jacobs is working towards, essentially, isn't it? He's being like Tomohiro Ishii, and having those two that's going to be a great match. That's going to be a sleeper match, I think, that maybe people who don't follow RevPro as closely as we do aren't going to be that excited about, but actually, when it happens, woof. Then we've got Zack Sabre Jr. against Ricky Knight Jr. And I know that's going to be a good match, but the Ricky Knight Jr. thing, it's hard to get excited, isn't it? Takagi versus Ospreay, we don't need to talk about that one. That's got a potential to be the match of the year. That just has match of the year potential written all over it. So, you know, let's see. That's one of those anyway. You just sit there with your arms folded, knowing you're going to watch a great match. You know, you don't have to go and you don't have to have kind of any kind of thought about it or any kind of you could be comfortable in the fact you're going to see a great match. And then the main event is Oku against Trent Seven, which I think is going to stink. I really do. Or maybe not stink. I think it's going to be fine. But you can never disregard Michael Oku. That's the big thing, isn't it, with him? That he can turn water into wine, that guy. Like, there's just something about him that's so effortless and brilliant that I think he could even turn this weird, half-told rubbish story into something good. So very excited for the CopperBox. I think it's going to be a great show. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there on my own as well. My wife doesn't fancy that one. So if you are about a loose end at the CopperBox in the interval or something, drop me a DM on Twitter and I'll come over and say hello. But that's CopperBox. Let's get to our favourite indie promotion. Let's go to the library and see what Purpose are up to. So we're off to the library then to talk about Purpose Wrestling. They had their guerrilla radio show. We'll always talk about Purpose Wrestling on this show. I think if they do a show, I want to talk about it. And I know there's probably other stuff like GWF that I could be talking about instead. But there's just something about Purpose that I absolutely love. It's just something about the passion and the love that they got for wrestling that just comes through. And I want to talk about it. So we're going to go and have a look at Guerrilla Radio. It started off with the 8-7 against Chapman and Will Caven. It was the younger Chapman. What's he called? I can't remember his name. The 8-7 looked great. You know, cool as anything. Do you know what I like about the 8-7? And this was Remy and Wavy. I like the fact that they look natural. Like, they don't do the weird pro wrestling poses. They just sort of come out and are naturally intimidating and naturally cool looking. Naturally have like a great swagger about them. And I think in this day and age, it kind of, so I sound like an old man then, but these days that kind of just stands out, doesn't it? When someone's been stripped of all the pro wrestling bollocks and they just are cool, intimidating looking people. Because Remy I've never seen before, and he looked great, and he was really impressive here. Like, he's not a wrestler I've ever come across. I think he's relatively new to the game, and just the way he was dropping these huge bombs, the way he was working was absolutely incredible. And more what he could do with his face as well. Like, he dropped this huge Liger bomb, and his eyes would just be wide with brutality and anger, and came across brilliantly. Looked like $1,000,000. Caven, I'm a little bit funny about. Didn't really like Will Caven's work in RevPro. And I was always a bit conflicted about it because I think Will Caven is a really good worker. My problem with Will Caven was always his presentation. So he feels a bit like a pound shop Seth Rollins. He's a bit edgelordy with the trunks, and he comes across as a bit of a creator wrestler. He does the weird cackling and the weird heel stuff that we were talking about before. But when he works, he's a much better worker than that. And I think if he changed his presentation slightly, he'd be really exciting and interesting. But he doesn't. He just kind of pigeonholes himself a little bit, I guess, which I think is a real shame. This match was really good. You know, I thought, like I say, Remy was really impressive. The gut wrench he did was great. His drop kick is great. And this is what I love about Purpose, is it feels like you're always finding a new wrestler. You know, you come away from every show thinking, I've never heard of that person, or I've seen the face or the name from Twitter, but now I've seen them and I get them, and they get time to do things in a really good light. So yeah, Remy's going to be one I'm going to be looking at in future. Next up, we had Ollie Peace against Santa Bryan. Ollie Peace is a rapper now. He got on the microphone at the start and he's saying, you know, things like, "Don't get it twisted, y'all." And, you know, he's got this library's going to be shaking, boom, boom, shake, shake the room and stuff. And just a very, very bizarre thing, you know. I think he's done it before, hasn't he? I think he's been the rap master before, but I've not seen it for a long time. I don't really remember it anyway. Because Ollie Peace is one of those people who, I get that he's been around longer than you think. You know, he's done sort of like WrestleForce stuff for like, he's been around like 10, 15 years. Just sort of places that nobody really watches. But he's a little bit of an unsung hero, I think, because he's against Santa Bryan, who's clearly an inexperienced wrestler, but has got a little bit of excitement about him. And he was just, you could tell he was leading him through it. You know, there was a few sort of, he talks too much, botchamania moments where you could just see him directing the match. But I think Ollie Peace is one of those wrestlers who, I don't know, I think he's a little bit underrated. I think he's a bit of a veteran that would fit in a few more rosters than he perhaps gets the opportunity to work for, if that makes any sense. But yeah, really good. Great selling, you know, as he was running the match. I thought Xander was good, lots of high-flying stuff. Doesn't quite have the dedication to what he's doing at times, you know, doesn't quite let things breathe in the way he should do, but he feels a bit backyard, but he's very inexperienced, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not going to labour that too much, because wrestlers like him should be in places like Purpose, because they're the best place to go for people like, you know, young wrestlers, because they develop them really well. Rex Armstrong is having a baby, so he's retiring. So they did a Battle Royal Gauntlet thing with his mate JJ Lynch as the referee, and this was a bit of fun, you know, quick counts and things like that. You know, Francisco would come out and get visual pins and get eliminated. You know, Josh Hugh James came out looking good, but touched the ref and got eliminated on a disqualification, because he did like the 2 count and then it didn't go for the 3. And Josh James is like, JJ Lynch is like, it really hurt my hand, you know. So Josh James would grab it to look at it and go, right, you've touched the referee, you're out. You know, it's that kind of comedy, which actually kind of worked in this situation. It's not necessarily my sort of thing, but I thought it really worked. Mark True came out for this, and Mark True was in my top 10 matches of the year last year. The only person who would put him anywhere close, I think, not because people don't like him, but because, you know, no one's seeing him. And I really think it's Mark True's time to work. I really hope he gets in RevPro. it's his time to work, you know what I mean? Like, go to places and work and go into bigger sort of promotions. It's not a disrespect on purpose. They are a great first step for people and a great promotion in their own right. But kind of like Jordan Breaks has took that next step, started working for RevPro. I'd love to see Mark True do that because he just gets it. The way he moves, the way he works, his charisma. It's even in this little spot in a gauntlet match where he's just going to be eliminated relatively quickly. He still comes across as someone who's got a lot of potential. So I'd just love to see him do more stuff. Harry Sefton was in this, who was really good, but he came back in later on. And there was a wrestler who I don't know. I actually don't know him. I've never seen him. And he's called James Farrell. And I'm going to Google him now on air like a professional. I've never known him to be in anything. And basically here he is. Oh no, he's got a pro wrestling wiki. Yeah, that's him. The Natural Athlete. Has he got a cage match? Jamie Farrell, has he got a cage? Because I thought, basically did this thing where he stood up and said, what the hell is this? Like, he was like, what is going on here? I booked tickets to see a wrestling show and I'm watching this stupid comedy. He doesn't have a cage match. But as he was doing this and he said, I came to watch this stupid comedy, I was like, yeah, you're right. And what a great gimmick to have, and what a great little story to tell. And he came in the ring and attacked people and was doing this promo, and the crowd are booing him and they say to him, who are you? But who are you? Who are you? And he played it perfectly because he didn't go into this heelish nonsense of saying, I'm Jamie Farrell and I'm a proper wrestler and I'm here to do this, that and the other. He didn't do any of that. He ignored them. He just had this air about him in his turtleneck black sweater that he was better than them. It was such a great promo, to come out and just say, I want to see some wrestling and I'm a wrestler. I want to see some people being put in holds and what are you doing with this nonsense? It's pathetic. He was basically me on this podcast quite a lot of the time. Like when there's a dance-off. Maybe that's why I related to it so much, because that's usually my stance on things. And I love the idea of them having these people like the Chapman brothers in there and the, Caver and these kind of caricature kind of comedy wrestlers. And then just having this guy who's like, no, I'm a proper wrestler and I'm going to stretch you. I don't know what they're going to do with him. I don't know if he's booked at the next show or anything, but I thought it was such a great idea. I got really, really into it. Now, when you watch a Purpose Wrestling show that it's going to be the comedy bits, and if you like that, you like that. And I think they do it well. But there's always going to be one match on every show that I seem to give 4+ stars to. And that's why I keep coming back to them, because you can go to like a GWF and you can go to a WXW and you can go to a Progress, you can go to a North and all these other promotions that feel bigger. They feel more significant on the scene. And yet you'll watch a match and it'll be a series of 3-star specials. It'll be a series of 3-star specials. Yet I know that every time I watch a Purpose match, a Purpose show, I'm going to get a 4-star plus match. And it was this one for this show. Maya Matthews against Sapphire Reed. This match was great. And if I know a lot of people who listen to this will just go and watch when they put on YouTube, they'll go and grab a couple of recommended matches. This is the one to watch. I thought this match was great. And you know how a match is going to be good right from the start, because these little clues. And one of my little clues is going straight to a really nasty collar and elbow. And that's what they did. And these two absolutely battered each other for about 15 minutes. And they were so good at it. Just Sapphire Reed just has this great approach. She's just punches and hits and fights. And she goes a little bit too far with the facials every now and then. But, it's the way she wrestles with, like the pair of them actually, wrestle with such maturity. just a really slow pace and let things breathe, but still battering each other at the same time. You know, the shotgun drop kicks, the German suplex in this. Unbelievable. The slapping things. Such a great, great match, this. I absolutely loved it. The ending, again, I wasn't a fan of this because basically Sapphire Reed got a foot up on the rope and Amira pushed a foot off. But it didn't really work because they were too close to the ropes anyway, and the ref should have been watching for limbs on ropes. So it was one of those things, like we said before with the Alex Windsor spot, that actually didn't make your heel look clever, you made your ref look dumb. And that's one of my little pet hates. But I don't think it ruined this match that much because, like I said, the work was absolutely fantastic. And I love the way they played that bit off at the end as well, that Maya Matthews was like, why were people booing me as I left? I don't get it. And, you know, Sapphire Reed went up to her and said, look, you know, we had a sporting contest, but you need to know what happened. And I think that is Purpose's signature for me, and that's why I like them, is that they'll do pro wrestling things, but people will react to them in a real way. Like Sapphire Reed will just go up to Maya Matthews and say, look, this is what your friend did. This is how you won. You pushed I had my foot on the rope and it got pushed off. So even though I might not like the execution of it, I think the idea is still worthwhile and really good. Next up, we had a utter bizarre match. Chris Hatch against Michael Oku. Now, the background to this is David Francisco wants a match with Michael Oku. And Oku says, yes, you can have the match, but I have to lose first to an opponent of my choosing. Which was such a weird stipulation. And then when he said Chris Hatch, the referee, it all made sense. And I tweeted when they announced this match, Hatchamania is running wild. And it really was, because there was Hatchamania flags, Hatchamania t-shirts. I tell you what, this match was actually alright. Oku was basically taking bumps on himself, you know, throwing himself around the ring. But his selling was unbelievable. You know, there was all sorts of little cokey spots in this, because Chris Hatch is, I assume, his wife or his partner or something, came out, and she's a photographer for the promotion, and she, you know, Oku got Chris Hatch, tied him up and said to his wife, get the camera and get a picture. So his wife used the flash in his eyes and blinded him, and he sold it all cartoony, and, you know, he was giving himself Canadian destroyers and all that. He was really good fun. You know, at the end, Oku super kicked his wife, you know, and things like that. But Chris Hatch won, as you probably expect. He won by count out because Oku got too cocky. So basically, you know, it's just, you were going to get the Francisco match now, and I just thought that was really exciting. Then we had the main event. We had Jordan Breaks against Nino Bryant. Now, Nino Bryant won this. Nino Bryant is very much Purpose's guy. You know, they've sort of portrayed him getting fluke wins against people like Ollie Peace, and, you know, he's been working his way up, and he's been having some really good matches, and he's very much a Purpose wrestler in the sense that you look at him in a promo picture and you think, who is this child, you know? And then he has a match and you have to shut your mouth, you know, because he has great matches. And this match was, I really enjoyed this match. I like the fact as a promotion they're not afraid to do babyface versus babyface as well, which is really cool. And Breaks was utterly dominant here, like you'd expect. He did this move at one point. Like, he was doing all his usual submission moves, but he was doing a lot of power moves as well, because he could, you know, because he's Nino Bryant's a lot smaller. And he did this weird kind of boss man slam spin into a backbreaker, sorry, that was brutal. It looks amazing. And Nino Bryant's selling is just off the charts. Great stuff. You know, Breaks was just battering him all the way through. And I like, you know, what I said about making little stories make sense. They really did that here, because Jordan Breaks isn't a brutal wrestler. He isn't a malicious wrestler, but he's defending that belt. And he knows to defend that belt, he's got to take it to the next level. And that's the most important thing. And it really, really, you know, kind of added to it. It made it feel more serious and more important. Big styles clashes and, breaks just being able to sell Nino's comebacks really, really well. Nino Bryant won, and he's the champion now, which is an interesting one. I don't know. He didn't feel like he was ready to be champion in kind of his story. I felt like that was something that would have been built up a little bit longer, but I'm wondering if, Jordan Breaks he's getting a lot more work in places like RevPro, but then he's going to get beat a lot in RevPro, so it does kind of make sense to take the belt off him. I don't know if it is something like that, or they just want to give Nino Bryant a chance, but either way, I think Nino Bryant has got enough goodwill for me to go along with it. I think he's had a lot of really great matches in Purpose, and I'm really excited to see what he does. Again, this is another Purpose show that I'm recommending that you watch. I think in terms of show from top to bottom, it's going to be as good as anything you watch in Europe. I think they're one of the most underrated promotions going. I really do. And every time they do a show, we're always going to review it. Get on the Patreon, get subscribed, get on the YouTube, get watching. Anyway, let's wrap things up. Okay, so our next episode is going to be our last one before AEW All In Weekend. I know we previewed the CopperBox on this show, but we'll have a look through absolutely everything because we should hopefully know a little bit more about All In terms of matches and what's actually going to be going on. We should know, have the Stardom cards announced. There's bits and pieces coming out from Progress. So we're going to try and preview as much as we possibly can. And go through everything we can and really give like a bit of a user guide really and preview the weekend because I'm going to be down there myself and we'll talk about where I'm going to be and if you want to come and meet up or whatever, how to get in contact with me and that sort of thing. For now, I'm going to go and have some more of that mustard cheese because it was absolutely fantastic. And I've got some of these olives and I can't remember what they're called, but they taste like butter. They're absolutely amazing. Don't forget, don't bother with Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, but get in the Discord. If you go to the Voices of Wrestling Discord, there's Eurograps Express Room. I always say this, but I absolutely pride myself on having the friendliest Discord on the whole server. So just come in, post your cheese boards, and have a chat in there. All right, have a lovely fortnight, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Hey everybody, my name is Jesse Collins, and I want to tell you all about my show, the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. On the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, we do a thorough analysis on the biggest issues and trends within the pro wrestling industry. We talk a lot about pro wrestling media, we talk a lot about fan culture and wrestling's place within general pop culture, and we talk about the broader influences that are shaping the way we discuss and analyze the pro wrestling industry. We've had some of the brightest minds in the pro wrestling intelligentsia on the show, including WrestleNomics host Brandon Thurston, both Rich Craich and Joe Lanza from the Flagship Wrestling Podcast, Trevor Dame from the Through the Years podcast, and a whole lot more. This isn't a show for hot takes. It's not a show recapping the latest episode of television. This is a show focusing on the biggest topics in pro wrestling and doing a deep dive on the real stories behind the surface level analysis you might find elsewhere. The Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts, and we'd really appreciate it if you gave us a try. Thanks.
Hello there, everybody. It's me, Garrett Kidney, the co-host of You've Got to Be Kidding Me on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network.
And I am Liam Jones, my full name, and I'm also a part of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network as a co-host for You've Got to Be Kidding Me.
We are a TNA history podcast that covers TNA 1 month at a time. We cover all the drama, all the matches, all the Vince Russo nonsense you could ever want in your life.
Have you heard of TNA? I bet you have, but would it be funnier if two people made jokes over it the whole time? Probably.
So if that sounds like fun to you, check it out on this very Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network, and Liam will do bits and whatnot.